What's up, you team of savages? Let's go! Today I'm reacting to real reasons why America needs the South. In my opinion, one of the reasons is the oil. Second of reasons is those badass hats, cowboy hats that they wear, and those shoes for sure. Man, I love cowboy shoes. They look so good, and they're just wild people because they ride bulls, you know. So let's check it out the video.
It's no secret that the US is becoming more and more divided. Culture wars and Facebook arguments are driving people to their breaking points. Families and neighbors are turning every conversation into a verbal battlefield.
Is this true? Is it really true, guys? Mention in the comment section because I'm curious. Is this guy saying true?
With politicians playing an ever-expanding game of one-upmanship, some have even floated the idea of their state seceding. I know what you're thinking, we've seen this movie before. As the world gets stranger by the day, these ideas seem to be taking root in the minds of Americans everywhere. So what would happen if the southern states just split off from the United States? Does the US really need them? Are they an asset or a liability? With historically high obesity and poverty rates, and decades of low educational and economic opportunities, the South might be more of an anchor than a sail. We'll soon find out, but first let's identify which states are actually considered to be a part of the South. Now, clearly,
Florida, Texas, Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Alabama, other New Orleans for sure, and yeah, some like that. This is what I know. Maybe I said Carolina, right? Okay.
Some people in these states might feel differently, but the South, as defined by the United States government, includes Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina and North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Delaware. Now, some of you may be wondering why we included certain states in the South, such as Maryland and Delaware. That's because the US government defines the region as the states found on the other side of the Mason-Dixon line, which has been in effect as far back as the 1760s, with more states being added as the country expanded westward. This unofficial dividing line firmly cemented itself into the American cultural memory when it became known as the dividing line between slave-owning states and free states before the Civil War. So, while this collection of states may differ from some, it's the list we'll be looking at today. The American Civil War, the first time this whole secession idea was tried, was a tidal wave of blood that caused over 620,000 American deaths. While it did result in the overwhelmingly positive outcome of the slaves being freed and the United States being united again, one has to hope that a second secession crisis would be settled in a much more peaceful way. If it happens again, it won't be fought with muskets and cannons, but assault rifles and missiles.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the 6-barrel gun with the 6 barrels, right? That shoots like what, 200 bullets per hour per minute. So imagine putting those in a line and just people running at you and you just shooting them down, man. I mean, the civil wars are so savage. I mean, crazy. A lot of people. 600,000 people, man. That's a lot of people.
Some of the wounds from that horrible conflict have healed, but others remain, as Americans again find themselves divided with no signs of slowing down. So, if the unthinkable were to occur, and the South were to form its own government and break away from the rest of the United States again, what kind of impact would that have? Let's look at the numbers first. Looking at the population of the South, it's experienced exponential growth over the last 20 years. In 2000, around 100 million people were living in the southern states, and as of 2023, there are now around 130 million. This unimpeded growth was more than the West, the Northeast, and the Midwest all combined. The Northeast only grew by a couple of million, same with the Midwest, and the leader of the pack was the West, with about 7 million in population growth.
Let's not forget about the big exodus, if it's called like that, from California to Texas. Also, a lot of people from New York went to Texas because of the good taxation system, and it's, as I understood, it's not so expensive to live there. If you know other reasons why people leave California and New York to Texas, guys, leave it below in the comment section, please.
This great disparity in population is partly because the South is home to some of the states with the most consistent population growth, such as Florida or Texas.
Yeah.
For example, Texas gained a whopping 4.3 million residents between 2000 and 2010. During the same period, Florida increased by 2.8 million, while Georgia and North Carolina both increased by 1.5 million. So, as other areas of the country experienced a slow change in population, the South is maintaining a steady increase. This is partly due to improved economic opportunities in the South, but also due to a rising number of immigrants arriving through southern ports and border crossings. This continuing wave of immigration has been a hot-button political issue for years now, and will continue to be one as people continue to come across to the US. What's not debatable, though, is the impact they're having on their states. For example, in Texas in 2021, there were around 5 million immigrant residents in the state, which accounted for about 17% of the total state population. A census taken in May of 2023 showed that 9 of the 15 fastest-growing cities in the United States were located within the South, and 6 of those cities were located in Texas. Clearly, something is drawing people down below the Mason-Dixon line, and I'm fairly confident it's not just the weather and southern hospitality. Although Minnesota in February is a much tougher sell than Florida. If this incredibly large and fast-growing portion of the United States were to suddenly break off and form their own country, the results could be disastrous. Just looking at a potential population change, the United States would lose so much in tax revenue that the Secretary of the Treasury might drop dead on the spot. Not to mention the nightmare it would be for the military, as they would lose tens of thousands of service members and the use of several of its largest military installations overnight.
Also, for normal people, it would be just a collapse of the moral, because splitting of the country, this is just terrible, you know. When, again, another civil war, man, is coming, people will be desperate, man. They would be destroyed. I mean, this is so bad for people, for everybody. This is bad, basically.
Right off the bat, it's not looking great. So why are people flocking to the South? The answer is as old as time itself. Money. Money makes the world go round. Always has, and always will. Remember COVID, that chaotic period of time when the whole world got pretty weird for a while? Well, as with any good crisis, someone figured out how to profit off of it. And
I still think that COVID was like a fairy tale. I mean, like, I have a feeling that that time just didn't exist in my life, where we all were isolated. Man, how crazy is that? And it went so fast, but when you were inside, it went so slow, you know, so crazy, man.
no, I'm not talking about pharmaceutical companies, not this time. During the peak of COVID, the US saw a $100 billion wealth migration from the historically wealthy Northeast and other areas to the South. States such as Florida, Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee saw massive spikes in their GDP as employers and employees alike moved south. The South finally saw their GDP eclipse that of their northeasterly brethren by maintaining a share of the GDP of around 23.8% to the Northeast's 22.4%. During this same period, the Northeast saw a loss of about $60 billion when people and businesses left the region. Since 2020, the Southeast accounted for more than 2/3 of all job growth across the US, a figure which almost doubled what it was pre-pandemic. Remember those immigrants we just talked about? Immigrants are statistically much more likely to create new companies than people who were born in the United States. A study co-authored by an MIT researcher in American Economic Review Insights found that immigrants on the whole are about 80% more likely to start a new business than their American counterparts. Looking at data taken in 2021 in Texas, about 30% of the entrepreneurs in the whole state are immigrants, totaling about 437,000 entrepreneurs. These businesses have generated around $12 billion in income, and I'm sure that number has gone up since 2021.
Let's go, immigrants, let's go! I know, like, a guy, basically, he went with his family recently to America, and then he's close to opening his own thing, you know. Also, I heard a lot of stories about immigrants who came, and then now they like have big businesses, So probably, they don't have nothing to lose. They don't want to do shit jobs, and because of that, they like just open up their own stuff, But it's very hard to be a businessman. It's so hard, man.
With more and more immigrants arriving every year and pre-existing companies relocating to the South, it's no surprise that more businesses are being created, more jobs are becoming available, and more people are being persuaded to move down to Dixie. So now, as the economic gravity of the country shifts to the South, people are continuing to follow. It's a cycle of growth that looks like it'll continue accelerating for years to come as Americans spread out to greener pastures. Nonetheless, the southern states didn't stop there. Their manufacturing, energy, and agricultural industries have been revitalized and are becoming a massive boost to the economy of the region as a whole. In recent decades, both the auto and aerospace manufacturing industries have thrived in southern states. The automotive industry specifically began migrating to the southern states in the 1980s and never looked back. Auto manufacturers, specifically those from Asia and Europe, took advantage of the South's underutilized workforce, its relatively cheap and available land, and its warm climate. This migration has seen the southern states become some of the largest producers of automobiles in the entire country. From the 1980s to the present, the auto manufacturing industry in the South has taken off and has provided a massive economic boost to those states. Cars, trucks, or anything with wheels really, and an engine requires an insanely high number of parts and resources to make it work. These items are typically shipped in to be assembled into the final product. It's usually much better and much faster for everyone if the materials needed to produce the cars are available locally. And that's exactly
look at
what
that
happened.
robot. Oh my gosh, take a look at that. This is something from the science fiction movies,
In the South. With the southern auto industry growing every year, other supporting industries also began to grow and expand. Industrial production of things like plastics, rubbers, steel, aluminum, chemicals, and even robotics continue to see widespread usage in the southern auto manufacturing plants. With new facilities, plants, and refineries opening to fill the demand for car building materials, thousands of jobs were created in the process. So, long story short, the auto industry in the South has been immensely positive for the economy of the region, the United States, and the world in general. A similar outcome also happened with the aerospace manufacturing industry. When the aerospace industry decided to move a lot of its facilities down south, many other companies followed suit. In Louisiana, the expansion of NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility in New Orleans has attracted a multitude of companies as they build everything required for the next U.S. endeavor into space. Another example is the Aerospace Alliance, a venture consisting of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, whose mission is the advancement of the aerospace sector. They employ around 200,000 people and even offer training and education opportunities at 18 different institutions. With the auto, aerospace, and other various supporting industries thriving, this resurgence of the southern economy should not come as a surprise to anyone. Barring any major war or disaster, this trend should continue moving upwards. Most people not from the South might assume that the South's largest industry is agriculture. That was the case for many years, but more recently, other industries like the one we just discussed have overtaken it. But that said, the agricultural production of the South is still immensely important to its economy, providing food, resources, and jobs. It's also important to the US in general as well. 2 of the top 10 biggest food-producing chains are in the South, Texas and North Carolina. In 2021, Texas generated close to $30 billion in agricultural receipts, and North Carolina generated close to $15 billion. Other states, such as Arkansas, are playing a major role in U.S. agriculture as well, as they're the largest producer of rice in the country with over 40% of the market. The nutrient-rich soil, warm weather, and long growing season give the South an advantage when it comes to agriculture. As the world population continues to climb and more food is needed, the agricultural industry of the South will only grow in importance. Another major driver of Southern economic importance is the energy, natural gas, and oil industries. In 2022,
that's the big one, the biggest one, I guess.
Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma were all in the top 10 oil and natural gas producing states in the country. Texas is the big dog here, overtaking Alaska as number 1 in 1988, and today producing around 41% of the nation's oil and natural gas.
Man, USA is so blessed that they have oil on their own soil. Oil on the soil, bro. Because how good is that, man? Basically, I understand that when you go to war a lot, you need oil, and when you have the oil on your soil, then it means that it's going to be easier to get it, It's easier to feed the war machine also, and just the population. I don't know about the gas prices, though. I heard that in America, the gas prices are very high right now. I don't know how it works, but it doesn't make sense for me, at least, that you have oil and it's very expensive over there.
This shouldn't shock anyone, as the image of an oil derrick slowly pumping away is as synonymous with Texas as a cowboy or a longhorn steer. It's so integral to Texas that its largest public companies are in the oil industry. In addition to this, around 14% of all U.S. crude oil comes from federally run oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. While these are technically run by the federal government, for argument's sake, let's consider them a part of the South. Either way, the amount of oil and natural gas that comes out of the South is too large to be overlooked or written off. Talking about Texas again, they also produce the most renewable energy of any state, although this is overshadowed by their gas and oil production. You know what they say, everything is bigger in Texas. For example, in 2022, Texas generated 136,118 gigawatt hours from wind and utility-scale solar power. The next closest state was not even...
I'm not sure, I don't understand nothing in it, but it's a big number for sure.
And close, that being California with 52,927 gigawatt hours. Renewable energy, meaning wind, hydro, and solar power, is on the rise around the world, and certainly in the US. With the industry growing exponentially in the decades to come, states like Texas and Oklahoma will only increase in value to the United States. Another key aspect of the Southern economy is that of sports. It's no secret that SEC football is one of the most competitive and entertaining football conferences in the entire sport. It's so popular that despite being technically amateur-level football, it has continually higher attendance and more devoted fan bases than the professional teams that play in the same states.
Yeah, I saw those big stadiums full of people, and this is only college football, man. And the stadium is like 40,000 people. You kidding me, man? Are you kidding me, man? Here in Latvia, for a football match, we barely can get like 5,000 people into the stadium. You have like 40,000 easy, man. Easy, man. This shows how popular is the sport around the South.
Go to an Atlanta Falcons game and then go to a University of Georgia game. It's a world of difference. It's for the same reason that there aren't any NFL teams in Alabama. Trying to get fans in that state to care about a team other than Alabama or Auburn is a tall order. SEC football is close to a religion in the South, but it's also a money-making machine. In 2022, the SEC made over $800 million in revenue.
Wow.
The only other conference that beat it was the Big Ten, but the others, the ACC, Big 12, Pac-12, etc., were nowhere even remotely close to what the SEC made. Some only made about half as much. NASCAR is a high-octane adrenaline ride for millions of fans across the country, but it also produces a tremendous amount of money. NASCAR actually began in the South when moonshiners in the 20s and 30s started racing the modified cars they had been using to escape the feds. What began as dirt track racing by a handful of renegades has blossomed into a massive business that generates hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. As of 2024, 17 of 42 NASCAR tracks are located in southern states and are among the most popular races every year.
Listen, when I saw NASCAR like watching TV, I thought like, oh, there's nothing interesting. But I bet when you are live over there and you're watching how it's happening in the stadium, I bet it's so interesting because it's just hypnotic how they go around the circle, the speeds, the crashes. Man, the crashes in NASCAR is hard, man. By the way, I have a video about that also.
Talk about the Daytona 500 or going to the race at the Talladega, most people instantly know what you're talking about. As with SEC football, NASCAR is a money-making machine and one that the US should hold on to. Circling back and looking at the economic evidence presented here, if the South was to break away from the United States, it would be catastrophic for the US economy. Losing all of that economic growth, companies, energy, and money that moved down there would be a deep hole for the US to dig itself out of, and it's hard to say if it ever would. However, money and economics are all well and good, but they don't present the full picture of the southern states. You wouldn't judge a car based solely on its gas mileage, right? If that was the case, we would all be driving a Prius to work. No, you have to look at the South as a whole. Everyone agrees that better economic output and new money going into communities are positive things, but at what cost? What and how much are these new Southerners consuming, and does it outweigh what they're contributing? In terms of food consumption, southern states continually report some of the highest levels of food insecurity in the country. Food insecurity essentially means not having enough to eat and not knowing where your next meal will come from. So as it turns out, the South is not having a problem with people consuming too much food, it's actually the opposite. On top of that, people experiencing food insecurity typically turn to cheap and unhealthy options for their meals, which
Man, this is very hard to imagine that in this day and age, this kind of stuff can happen. You know, because I'm from Latvia, Europe. Thank God that I had opportunity to eat all my life. You know, in a childhood in 90s, it was a bit harder. But overall, I'm so grateful that I live in a part of world where there are no food shortages and there's opportunity for everybody to earn money for food, man. I'm so grateful for that.
Usually means fast food. This is a chronic problem that affects millions of Americans every day. Despite living in the wealthiest country on earth, the South is not immune to this trend. From 2020 to 2022, states like Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi all reported levels of food insecurity above the national average of 11.2%. Mississippi was the worst, with a rate of around 22%. The rest of the states weren't too far behind, unfortunately. If someone is not getting enough food or is eating exclusively fast food, they're much more prone to health problems and complications than those who eat a healthy, well-balanced diet.
That's for sure,
Obesity,
man.
diabetes, and chronic illnesses can be caused or exacerbated by unhealthy lifestyles and poor nutrition, all of which have long-term outcomes that are not positive.
Listen, there was a documentary about the guy who ate McDonald's for 30 days. After 30 days, he gained a lot of weight. He felt very bad. He was waking up during the night with the panic attacks because his heart was beating so hard, man. So, man, this is mad, I'm telling you.
So many in the South experiencing food insecurity, it affects more than just their health. While lack of proper nutrition can have a devastating effect on a specific person's health, it also affects the systems that make up the states themselves. By tying up money and resources taking care of patients experiencing complications caused by food insecurity, the healthcare system can't cover its other bases as well as it needs to. The ripple effects don't end there either. If someone is chronically unhealthy or always seeing doctors, they can't hope to be a good employee or entrepreneur in the long run. Increased absences from work or school are a detriment to a person's career potential and could result in changing their life's overall trajectory. It goes without saying that to be functioning at your best, you need to take care with what you eat and drink.
For sure.
How would you
doubt
expect a
about that.
Ferrari to perform if you only ever gave it the cheapest gasoline you could find? Having plentiful and nutritious food to eat is the bedrock of human success and something that affects every level of society if it becomes a problem. Rising levels of food insecurity can really only be solved by one thing: improving economic conditions for residents. More money equals better food and more of it, which in turn means fewer medical bills and more money flowing back into the economy. At least, that's the theory. The South might be currently lagging behind the rest of the country on this issue, but don't count it out just yet.
Man, when I was a kid, I was always wanting to ride one of these, man. This is one of the best, one of my dreams that I still have, by the way, to ride this combine, man. It looks like a robot, like a transformer, I'm telling you.
While it is still too early to tell what effect a revitalized economy and massive wealth migration will have on Southerners, hopefully it results in healthier, more widely available food. This will be a delicate dance, as getting healthier food to those most at risk will take time and effort, but better economic conditions overall are a good start. Looking at the southern states' energy consumption, it's actually on par with the rest of the country. Some states use more than others, but again, that's the standard across the rest of the country. The great outlier here is Texas, which leads the nation both in energy production and consumption. About half of their consumption comes from the industrial sector, which helps them produce more energy. When talking about consumption, you also have to talk about waste production. So, how much waste do the southern states really produce? As of 2022, the southern states are producing on average between 25 to 40 tons of waste in landfills per person. That sounds like a lot, and it is, but believe it or not, the South finds itself on the greener side of things here. There are a few outliers such as Kentucky, Louisiana, and Virginia, which are above 40 tons, but even these are nowhere close to what other states produce. The Midwest states of Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan are among the worst offenders with over 50 tons per person. Michigan takes it even further, touting a staggering 66 tons per person. This waste production of the southern states is comparatively not that bad. It's not great, but it could definitely be worse. One of the key measures of any country or society is not how much money they make, how much steel they produce, or how much oil they can drill. To get the full picture of a place, you have to look at the educational opportunities and the culture as well. No one goes to Italy to look at steel mills. They go for the art, the architecture, the music, and most importantly, the food.
And also to meet the people, you know, and see how the people live, to catch the vibes from the people.
Let's start with education. The South does not exactly have a great reputation when it comes to education. If you asked someone from Europe what they most associated with the American South, they would probably say something about NASCAR, the Dukes of Hazzard, or Larry the Cable Guy. College education or high literacy rates aren't exactly associated with the South, and sadly, it's been that way for a long time. This reputation isn't altogether unjustified either. Southern states made up 6 of the 10 states in the country with the lowest literacy rates. Couple that with 6 of the bottom 10 states for high school graduation rates being from the South as well, and it's safe to say that the state of education in the South isn't great. Despite having many prestigious universities in the South, such as Duke, Vanderbilt, and Johns Hopkins, a large portion of the students are from other parts of the country or even other countries entirely. Education remains a problem for the South and is something that will have to be addressed going forward. Where the South really shines is in its culture. The food in New Orleans, the music in Nashville, or the raw embrace of the natural world when stepping into the Appalachian Mountains brings tens of thousands of tourists to the region every year. The culture and natural wonders of the region are not only a treasure to all those living and visiting there, but also very profitable, driving that economy ever forward. These things are great, but what really sets Southern culture apart from the rest of the country are their politics and their religion. Again, a lot of the outside world stereotypes the South as a Republican, Christian, football-loving stronghold, and while this doesn't apply to everyone who lives there, it certainly applies to some of them. The GOP and Christianity have a monopoly on the southern states. It's called the Bible Belt for a reason. It's the land of megachurches and televangelism. People here are very religious and conservative, so with many of the Christian and Republican eggs in one basket, it would be a disaster for the GOP if the South decided to form its own country. The Republican Party, as we know it, would be absolutely gutted with the loss of the southern states. After the 2016 election, nearly every state legislature came under the control of the GOP. While some have flip-flopped since then, it's clear that conservative Christian voters still hold a lot of power in the US. So while many in this country might hate the current state of politics, just remember that a two-party system is much better than a one-party system. Ask some former Soviet citizens how that policy worked out for them. Looking at it,
Man, it worked out very bad. As a guy whose parents lived in Soviet Union, it worked out very bad. Look at Russia right now, man. That they have like the same like political party. 24 years at power, man. Nothing good, man.
All the evidence presented, one thing is abundantly clear. The US still needs the southern states, now possibly more than ever. Their growing population, economic importance, and cultural contributions cannot be ignored. Their population boom over the last 20 years has been outpacing every other area of the country, and urban centers continue to grow at surprising rates. With the migration of wealth and corporations to the southern United States, their importance continues to grow, as does the GDP of the states themselves. So what does all of this mean? It means that the United States is much better off when it's united.